Very much for coming along on a Sunday morning, and it's enormously invigorating to have an audience like this. I've given a few of these talks this year. I've talked to an Islamic finance group up in Manchester. I've talked to a Christian group. I've talked to the Bromsgrove Centre, which was a lot of people who've been banging away at this problem for 40, 50 years, and this is the first group of young, really educated students that I've talked to, and it's really important, I think, for all of us to take this stuff seriously, and because it is about our futures, and it is about the future of the planet. So I really want to say, just before I start, that this is what I hope will be the beginning of a broader social movement. That's what Ben's trying to do. Just a bit about NEF. First, we're one of the UK's major think tanks, I guess. We like to call ourselves a think and do tank, because we kind of get our hands dirty from time to time doing real things in the real world, apart from just sitting in our ivory tower. We've been around since 1987. Our kind of strapline, economics as if people and the planet mattered. It's quite important, really. We fundamentally don't believe in the current economic system or the way economics is taught in universities. I'm going to talk a little bit initially about how dangerous the current orthodoxy is in economics. So our strapline implies, of course, that actually the planet does not have finite resources. Wow, that's startling insight for many economists. And it also implies that we should design our economic policies to create social justice and well-being for people, because that's what the aim of economics should be. And just to say, all of our work at the moment is moving towards what we call this great transition, a transition to a low-carbon, sustainable economy with high levels of well-being, less inequality, and there's three elements to this broad campaign, which I welcome all of you to join, really. We're developing a new macroeconomic model, so actually got some number crunches in to work out how it's possible to massively reduce carbon emissions and not have disastrous levels of unemployment. We've got a new economics commission that we're putting together with lots of prestigious economists and policymakers globally. And we have a campaign which we kicked off just a couple of weeks ago, actually, with the publication of this Where Did Our Money Go book, which looked at the banking crisis, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, two plans I'm going to outline to you. The first one is a kind of slow, slightly ponderous plan, but it's very important, and it's kind of about trying to change the way we understand the way economics understands money, and to sort of point out what the problems with that understanding are, because it's only if we can do that I think we can persuade policymakers, central banks, and the banks themselves of the error of their ways. We heard a bit about this yesterday, and I'm not going to repeat that too much. But essentially, orthodox economics, classical economics, envisages money as a sort of neutral veil that kind of lies over the economy and just enables supply to meet demand through the pricing system. And that's it, really. Money is kind of, it's just there. There's no sort of explanation in economics textbooks of how money comes into circulation in the first place. It sort of magically exists somehow. And as Mary was talking about yesterday, the truth is, it doesn't magically exist to enable supply to meet demand. It exists because somebody creates it, somebody produces it, and puts it into circulation. And there's no analysis whatsoever in economics textbooks of how that actually happens. And the reason for that is because of this dominance of this notion of money as this kind of neutral veil. This equation lies at the heart of virtually all mainstream macroeconomic models of the economy. Just a quick question. How many people here have done economics or are doing economics? Good. Okay. Well, maybe we can have some good discussions about this. I mean, I haven't done economics, but I actually think that's a benefit in some ways when you're talking about this kind of stuff. Because essentially, this equation lies at the heart of it. What this equation is essentially the amount of money in the economy times the velocity of that money, i.e. how fast it's moving around the economy, should essentially be the same as the price system times the number of transactions, the prices of things times the number of transactions going on. And that's also known as nominal GDP. Now, there's some really big assumptions behind this this identity, or this equation. It was first proposed by Irving Fisher in 1911, but really classical economics had been moving towards it because classical economics has this conception of money as a... I'll take questions afterwards, if that's all right. The velocity of money is just how fast money moves around the economy. So we don't keep hold of money, we give it to other people, we buy things, it moves around. Yeah, a lot of assumptions underlying this key equation. Essentially, the key assumption really is that money itself is a commodity, as you heard yesterday, and that but that essentially that it, although it's a commodity, it only really has one function. It functions as a media of exchange. Okay, and really the assumption of this equation is that as soon as we get money, we do something with it. We buy something, we move it around. It never stops. We never hoard it. We never save it. We always immediately put it into real GDP. We buy stuff with it. It goes into this supply and demand system. And that's basically because we know exactly what the value of everything else is and when it's a good bet to buy. Because we have perfect information. And this is a kind of astonishing fact about orthodox economics, that it rests upon this kind of axiom of perfect information, that we all know all the time the value of everything, essentially. Now, the only way this identity can be built into neoclassical models of general equilibrium that dominate every single macroeconomic textbook you will read is if there is this basically an omnipotent auctioneer. Leon Walras, who is probably the founding father of general equilibrium models, had to invent an omnipotent auctioneer who knew all the prices of everything at the same time and enabled the price system to work magically, instantaneously, omnipotently. This is dream world. If economics, modern economics has proved anything about how the real world works, it's proved that the real world doesn't work like this, with an omnipotent auctioneer instantaneously deciding the price and the value of everything, so that equation holds true. That's what it is disproved. Okay, you've really got to understand that. That's what's happened. So back on planet Earth, things are, I'm afraid, a little bit more messy, a little bit more complicated. In reality, when we get money, we sometimes don't immediately spend it into circulation. Sometimes we hold on to it, especially when we're not very confident about what the economy is doing, about, what's happening to our house, price of our houses, what's happening with inflation. We hoard money, and Keynes obviously pointed this out as one of the main explanations for the Great Depression, and you can see it happening again today. And as Ben was explaining yesterday, when things go bad, people pay off their loans, their money supply reduces, or they don't put money into circulation, they save it. As I said, perfect information is a complete fallacy. Imperfect information is pervasive. Markets are virtually never in equilibrium. That's what economics has proved. They proved that in the real world, markets are never in equilibrium. There's no evidence of it ever really happening. They are just mathematical, very elegant, but very wrong mathematical models. And demand does not equal supply. Money is a strange kind of commodity, if it is a commodity, which I don't believe it is, because the demand for money is actually infinite. You know, I think the princess in Japan, there's some quote, has kind of 3,000 pairs of shoes. But even she eventually runs out of space in her house for pairs of shoes. You can never run out of space for money, because, you know, there is always more demand for it, as we heard yesterday. So it's not a commodity in the same way as most things. So we live in a world of rationed markets, essentially, and money and credit is also a rationed market. And where things are rationed, they're determined by quantities, not by prices. So there's this term, the short side principle. So whichever is smaller, the demand or supply, that quantity will be transacted. That's a sort of basic tenet, which everyone's pretty much in agreement with. And what that means is that whoever controls the short side, in this case money, can extract enormous benefits from it. So whoever has that power of creation and allocation of money has enormous power, because there's always more demand for money than there is supply, especially in our modern economies where the businesses have limited liability, right? A business always wants more money because it knows it can invest, and ultimately nobody has personal liability if things go wrong, okay? So it's that short side principle always applies. So, bankism, that's a horrible term. I think corporatism was the one that came up yesterday, which maybe is a better term, although it meant something quite different in the 70s and the 80s in Europe. But anyway, we have this very strange system where basically, in modern capitalism, as we call it, that we have a set of very powerful allocators of this rationed resource, credit, deciding how to use it and when. And there's kind of 5 key points about these allocators, as we talked about yesterday. Firstly, they're not accountable to us, to people, to any kind of democratic force, and the central bank's not really accountable either for its decisions. Secondly, they're not subject to normal market forces, to market competition. They have a monopoly on the thing that they provide for us. Legal tender, it's a monopoly. There's nobody competing with them with different forms of currency. Thirdly, they're driven by short-term profit, quarterly returns, yet they are underwritten by the taxpayer. Totally bonkers. Fourthly, they are incentivized, as we've seen, to create credit for non-productive, speculative investment. As Ben was saying yesterday, it's a lot more sensible for a bank to loan on a mortgage, because they can repossess your house, than it is to loan to a business where there's limited liability. They won't get anything back if things go badly wrong. Okay? And fifthly, they happen to be called banks. I don't think banks is a very appropriate term for these organisations myself. I think we can come up with something more imaginative than banks. I think banks should be intermediaries, recycling money, a la Captain Mainwaring or Jimmy Stewart.